And what we're creating through what we think and feel. So all creation is a vibrational alignment, whether it is the health in your body or your physical circumstances or even your mental circumstances, because thought attracts thought. So when we get on a momentum or a trajectory of thought, sometimes we spiral and we feel like we can't get out of it. But the truth is that with a bit of focus, you can. And once you shift a thought, then you can spiral back the other way. Like you can spiral into a pit or you can spiral out of it. And so it is knowing, first of all, it is knowing that we are at power to choose what we want to think about. And we can do that through
Let's talk shift.
Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Moon, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Shift, a place where we have deep conversations about the shift in human consciousness that's currently going on, what that means to us individually and collectively. And I always try to garner a couple tips on how we can have just a little bit more fun during this wild ride. And this week I have the delight of bringing to you Karen Swain. Karen is a channeler, a medium, and a psychic. And she is also a teacher of deliberate creation. And in it, she activates, she accelerates, she acclimates, and she accentuates the new world teachers that are showing up on the scene. She supports light weavers, difference makers, and starseeds who are bringing in the new dawn of reality currently coming our way. And she helps people remember this important thing, who they are and why you are here on Earth, what you've come to do. She's one of Australia's foremost thought leaders and change agents, and she shows you the way to a more joyful connection, yay, with the multi-dimensional life that we are all living. And I am just so honored. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, and let's together talk shift.
Karen, welcome to the show. So lovely to have you here and so lovely to connect with you again.
Hello, Moon. Beautiful to connect with you again, too. Great to catch up. You look amazing, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Life is good. It's kind of a wild roller coaster, though, right now, isn't it?
It is a wild roller coaster right now. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, humanity's going through some fun stuff. And we were talking a little bit before we hit record. And you know, the focus of the show is kind of what's happening with human consciousness. What does it mean to us individually and collectively? And how can we have more fun during it? And you and I were talking about how there's just, for both of us, there's so much coming up. And you mentioned, you know, limiting beliefs coming up because we can't take those with us where we're going. So
Exactly.
What is coming up with you right now?
Well, what's coming up with me right now is what's coming up for everybody on the planet. We're being asked to really resolve the conditioned habitual beliefs within us. And we have a choice. We either resolve them and move to a new state of mind or not. And that's the choice we've always been given on planet Earth. But what's happening now is this acceleration or this turning up, what's the word I'm looking for, amplification of light that's hitting the planet, which is revealing all the hidden distortion to it. And so when you reveal the distortion to the light, it's in your face. It's in your face everywhere. So it's happening globally and it's happening personally. So all those people that have been on spiritual paths like me that think that you've got it all sorted and then you haven't got it all sorted, it just means there's more to do. But what the guides are saying is that many teachers on the planet or wanderers or starseeds, people that have, or the volunteers, people that have volunteered to be here for this time of shift, have taken on a lot of karma, for a better word, density of the collective that they're working with. So often we think this is personal, this is me, this is all about me, this is my problems. But really we're working with energies that when we resolve them or when we love them, when we transmute them, we're doing it for the collective. It's a global story, but as as humans who are rooted in separation, when we feel bad or we hit our negative emotions or frustrations or whatever we're hitting, we make it personal. We make it about me. It's my story. It's all about me. Poor me. Woe's me. Woe's me. Instead of understanding that we're part of this unification, we're part of this collective. And as we shift the energies within ourselves, we do so for the collective.
You know, that's a really important point, Karin, and it kind of lightens the load for me and those that, you know, are going through this journey alongside me, knowing that all of the things that are coming up, you know, we're clearing for those that we love, those that we don't know, our ancestors, our future self. And when we really turn inside and start looking at what we believe and why we believe it, and then applying ways to shift it, we free not only ourselves, but we lessen the burden on others.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important for us to heal ourselves right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Or rather than heal ourselves, because heal ourselves denotes that there's something wrong with you. And when you're somebody who has volunteered to be on Earth, has a cleaner of density, there's actually nothing wrong with you, but you're just facing what you came to do. So if we can reframe it and look at it like that, like heal ourselves says, there's something wrong with me. I need to fix myself. I need to heal myself. And when we get into that state of mind, it becomes really hard because we get into that whole story of I'm not enough, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not, you know, we get into the unworthiness, I'm not enough story. But when we see that what we're going through is part of our soul's plan, our soul's mission to clean up density, to help, I'm getting this image of mop it up. They're giving me this image of a mop, to mop up the density. So what they're saying is, like, when you clean the house, you don't deem the dust on the floor as, you know, wrong. You just clean the house. Just clean the house. And that's what they're saying about what we're doing as light workers on the planet. We're cleaning house. We're cleaning house so that when we shift into a new experience on planet Earth, we've got this nice shiny house to move into. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I love the vision that came up when you were talking about that, and I'm trying to rack my brain and remember. I'm dating myself, but it's a hard knock life for us, and the kids are all cleaning and mopping because it's like,
Yeah.
all right, we got a clean house. How do we have a good time doing it?
Absolutely.
How do you right now? How are you having a good time doing this work, right?
Yeah. What they're saying is, so when I say they, I'm you know, talking to my mob, what I call my mob. Yeah, I like, you know, they keep bringing me this old saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So yeah, I mean, being here on planet Earth, we're going to bump up against contrast, better than pain. I like that word, better than pain. And we can suffer over it or not. That's a choice we make. We can suffer over our suffering. Often my guides, when I'm suffering over my suffering, when I'm doing the, whoa, poor me, poor me, they're like, oh, get over yourself. You're just suffering over your suffering.
Leave it to our higher self guides to just like make little of all these things that we think are such huge mounds, right?
Absolutely. I had a girlfriend here the other night and I was chatting about all this stuff, and they were just coming in and just giving me all this, you know, pep talk. And I'm like, yeah, I know it. It's like a parent that talks to you and you know they're right, but you don't want to listen because, I don't know, the poor me pity party story can be so seductive sometimes. It can like seduce you into your staying in that vibration.
Yeah,
You don't
and
have to.
you know, the known is very seductive. It's very feels safe because it feels known. And I don't watch the news. I don't watch any of that. I get enough of that from just headlines and what people tell me. And I've been in the world long enough and working for the government and all those things that I have a
Yeah.
pretty good idea of what's going on. And you know, when you talk about that seduction, there is so much noise out there right now trying to pull everybody deeper and deeper down into that fear trail of seduction. And there really is a bifurcation in humanity where those are just saying, I'm not going to fight against that anymore because fighting just that's more of the same, and that just increases the energy. So I'm going to turn my attention away from it and just starve it through lack of attention. And that feels so much lighter. And when you're working with people, what are some of the things that you help people with, or that your guides are saying right now to help humanity feel a little bit lighter during this? Because, you know, laughter and love are a very, very high vibration. And I find that when I can laugh at something or with something, that the transformation, the transmutation is so much more rapid. And it just feels so, so good.
Well, what the guides always say is you get to create your own story. So regardless of what's happening on the planet, you live in your own little bubble of your own creation. And I remember I opened a shop during the recession of the early 2000s. Now, where are we? I can't remember what date it was. How old was my daughter? Yeah, in the 90s. It was in the 90s. And everyone said to me, why are you opening a business in the middle of this recession? And I said, what recession? You know, like, we get to create our own story based on what we believe to be true. And it's the same with now. So we can get swept up in the collective story. Like you say, you don't look at the news. Like, we can get swept up in what's happening on the news, because, you know, over the last few years, what's been happening has been a global story. It's been everyone. So we can't help but get swept up in what's happening, because it is a global story. It's not just happening to China or Russia or the United States or Australia or New Zealand. It was a global story, and we all got swept up in that global story. But inside the global story, we still live in the bubble of our own creation. Again, we can suffer for it or not. During the last couple of years, you know, I live near the beach, and we had all the dramas that were happening, the lockdowns and everything like that. But I just didn't buy into the story at all. And I went outside and witnessed some crazy things, like police giving out fines to people sitting on park benches, stuff like that. But, you know, for the most part, I was watching people, like, we could go outside if we were exercising. So everyone was in exercise gear. So I'm watching people out there walking their dogs and still enjoying the day, even though they were keeping us off the beaches. So I live right next to a beach, like, they stopped us. But even inside the collective story, we can still create our own joy. And that's something that we need to remember, that we are the creators of our own reality. We're creating what we believe to be true, even inside the collective story. There was a man that I saw in 1995 speak at a conference in Maui, who had been in a jail, Vietnamese jail, for 7 years in a coffin, like the size of a coffin. He could sit up about 3 foot high and about 6 foot long. And he was in that for 7 years. And he talked about finding bliss. So he said that his body couldn't do what he wanted to do, but his mind could go anywhere he wanted. He's since passed on. It's funny, because for years I wondered where he was, and then I found him after much research this year, but he passed on a couple of years ago. But that's the message that the guides and he and many people, you too, have, you know, shown us, that regardless of what's happening in our state of body or our physical circumstances, our mind is free. Our mind is always free. Our mind is free to go wherever it wants to go. So am I choosing this thought? Does it feel good? Or can I find another thought that feels good? What he did is he left his body and went flying around the universe. And he was free to fly around the universe while his body was in prison. But he spoke about when he came out of jail, he obviously found God during that time. He wasn't very religious per se before he went in, but he spoke in a very religious way when he came out, because that's the way the mainstream, you know, the collective understands spirituality, through religion. And so he spoke about unlocking the jail cell of the mind. You know, like, to unlock the jail cell of the mind, we don't have to be in jail just because our physical circumstances are not to our liking. So that's what the guides say to pretty much everyone that comes for a session, and my clients, and that's what I teach. And something that I'm being asked more than ever to apply in my life, as well, as we're going through a sort of a huge transition. I've been going through a bit of a transition this year, not feeling the same way about everything, and feeling discombobulated, like, why don't I feel as passionate as I normally feel? And as on it as I normally feel. And then the guidance I've been getting is just sit back, you're going through a transition. And I think that, as somebody who's just moved, that those transition times in your life, they can be physical, they can be mental, they can be emotional, are a bit off-putting, they're a bit unstabling, but we need to sort of balance ourselves as we go through transitions.
Yeah, there's a lot of time right now that's being called upon us to just be. And that's so different than humanity has known or understood, acknowledged, or even thought was possible. And we were just, I think COVID was the beginning of that. You guys are going to learn how to just be,
Yeah.
And that was like a massive opening, I think, of a lot of people's consciousness of what's going on in their own mind and in their own internal world. And I want to talk a little bit more about the deliberate creation that you can only do once you get inside your own internal world and start really dissecting what's true and what's a limiting belief, what's a belief that I've held for so long that I don't know the difference between it and me. And coming out of that global kind of mass creation mindset and into individual deliberate creation mindset.
And what we're creating through what we think and feel. So all creation is a vibrational alignment, whether it is the health in your body or your physical circumstances or even your mental circumstances, because thought attracts thought. So when we get on a momentum or a trajectory of thought, sometimes we spiral and we feel like we can't get out of it. But the truth is that with a bit of focus, you can. And once you shift a thought, then you can spiral back the other way. Like you can spiral into a pit or you can spiral out of it. And so it is knowing, first of all, it is knowing that we are at power to choose what we want to think about. And we can do that through changing our thoughts, having a focus, or using this physical world to help us change our thoughts, like watching something funny or putting on beautiful music or having a gorgeous conversation. But if we, with a friend, or patting the cat or the dog or taking the dog for a walk or being out there with nature and finding gratitude for nature. But if we consistently rely on our physical circumstances to shift our mindset, then what we're saying to life and to the universe is that I'm not in control of how I think or feel. Circumstances need to, change for me to think in a certain way. And this is the collective understanding up until this point in our shift in evolutionary history, right? Is that we all talk about, like if you talk to anyone, I'm feeling upset. Why are you feeling upset? Well, this is happening to me and that person said this and I've broken up with that person. And, we're all talking about the circumstances impacting our thoughts rather than because I'm choosing to be upset in the moment. Like, does anyone ever say when you ask, what's wrong? Why are you upset? I'm choosing to be upset in this moment. This is my choice right now. We all blame life for how we think and feel. And so being deliberate is knowing that we can be deliberate in how we think or feel. And we can use the physical world to help us shift, but we don't need to rely on it. So like the man in a prison, he couldn't use his physical world to shift his thinking. He had to go inwards and shift his thinking deliberately and find a connection to his higher self and not the physical self who identifies as the physical world experience, as the body, as the circumstance, but as the consciousness behind it, as the soul behind it, who is free, who is multidimensional, who is living many lives at once, who is in communication with their guides constantly and can fly around the universe if they choose. So I think that moving your identity from the physical to the consciousness or the soul or the spiritual is really the journey for many people who might be feeling not great at the moment and trying to make the world look the way they want it to look in order to feel better. Because it doesn't matter how many beautiful circumstances you live in, the journey is within into that new identity of who you are as soul, as infinite.
Karen, will you explain to the audience what you or your guides words can have so many different meanings. And so when you say, shifting your awareness and just shifting your consciousness, what is consciousness?
That's a big question, Moon.
I know, right? I love to ask it.
No one's ever asked me that question before. What is consciousness? Well, they're just saying consciousness is who you are. They're just using the words that we've been using. It is awareness. Consciousness is awareness. So when you think of what you're aware of right now, like who's aware and why are you aware? So consciousness is awareness. This is something I've never contemplated before. I've never thought about before. They're giving it to me. So consciousness is awareness and infinite and multidimensional. Many people have said consciousness is soul or spirit, and they're saying, oh, you can use all those names, but consciousness is the awareness of all that you have labeled as physical, spiritual, soul, God, guides, like it is the awareness of that. So how big is your consciousness? It's as big as your awareness. And so in this experience, when we insert a part of our consciousness into this experience, we do so under the limitation of what this experience gives us, in that we're very unaware of the multidimensional, infinite aspects of who we are. And as we awaken to the truth of who we are, this is what spiritual awakening is, our awareness expands. And so we're aware that we're physical and spiritual simultaneously. We're aware that we're ego and love simultaneously. We're aware that we're fear and love simultaneously. We're aware that we have choice. Yeah, consciousness is awareness. What a great question. I've never contemplated that like that. So I'm learning.
Well, I love to contemplate it because, all the big conversations are, well, the consciousness of humanity is rising. And so for me, I'm like, all right, what is that? And I came to the same conclusion. I was like, it's awareness, because when you're in like the depths of your depression, your awareness is this big, right?
Right.
And when you're in the depths of pain and suffering, your whole awareness and focus just shrinks.
Right.
And now we're becoming like so aware, and it's so expansive that we're starting to see other dimensions and other beings and other aspects of spiritual expression, of the creator's expression.
I remember when I was young and I was suffering over a breakup, some boy would dump me and I'm doing, oh, no one's ever going to love me, I'm so unworthy, doing my pity party. There was a part of me that was aware, that was witnessing and kind of sitting on the couch, eating popcorn, watching the show, like really enjoying the me that was suffering and doing the no one's ever going to love me, poor me sort of thing. And I was aware that there was a part of me that was aware, and I didn't really understand what was going on. And then I did, as I moved into the awareness of my awareness. But I remember I had one of the first NDEs, or maybe the first NDE I have on my show, Nancy Rhines. She was hit by a truck, an atheist. She was hit by a truck and dragged under the truck and broke about 24 bones multiply. But anyway, during the moment that she was hit by a truck, a woman texting, a small truck, a sort of trailery thing, texting on the phone, hit her, and she was on a bicycle. She saw herself from outside the truck being dragged under the truck, but at the same time, simultaneously, she was experiencing being dragged under the truck. So there was these two aspects to her awareness, the one that was witnessing and the one that was experiencing. And I think that was for her the first moment that she had a spiritual awakening, because after that, when she was in hospital, she had an NDE and it was all explained to her. Then she was given her marching orders, go back and tell humanity. And so this atheist had to come back and talk about all this stuff, which was great. But she's doing a great job, and she's talking to like thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people by now. So she's doing a great job. But I loved that part of her story because it reminded me of mine when I was in my pity party, how there was somebody watching as if I was watching a sad movie and, enjoying the show, like enjoying, just like when someone's, suffering on a television screen and we're crying, but we're enjoying it at the same time. Yeah. So if we could place our focus or attention or awareness or consciousness onto the part of us that's witnessing us, then we become less attached to the story. And with less attachment is less suffering.
Yeah. And that, I think, is the essence of compassion. It's observing without that judgment of this is good or bad, or this is me, or this isn't me, or I'm worthy of that, I'm not worthy of that. It's just holding that space and observing. Kind of, it's got to be like our higher self is just watching us, as we're spinning out and
Oh,
we're doing the pity party
absolutely.
stuff, and they're
Uh-huh.
just like, listen, honey, you're going to pop out of that physical form, come back up here
Mhm.
and want to do this all over again. So,
Right.
let's enjoy the ride.
But
Enjoy the
you
ride.
experienced that too during your experience,
I
right?
did.
Like
I
popping out and being a part of that awareness that is witnessing who you are as the, mind, personality, body complex.
Yeah, and just realizing that the movie that I had been playing on repeat was simply just a movie, wasn't who
Hmm.
I was, and I could simply pop it out and put another one in. And that's an amazing awareness, um, that I would love if I think more people are starting to really observe. They're observing, right? We're being kind of forced into it. What is it that we're
Hmm.
thinking and feeling, and why? And I'm noticing in the people that I'm encountering that they're just absolutely baffled and in that amazing confusion where they just can't make sense of anything. They're having to go with inside and find the sense of safety and
Yeah.
connection and self.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you sort of ask me that question, what are, people you're talking to, your clients, sort of thinking, I'm just having this epiphany right now. And many people, like you talk about compassion, people believe compassion is sympathy. And I don't think compassion is sympathy. But so many people, when they're in their story, want that sympathy. I had one client once, it's happened to me many times where people want me to have that sympathy for them and go, oh, that's terrible, poor baby, that's so terrible. That story that we all have with friends when they're in their story. But I don't do sympathy. It's something my daughter hates because she wants me to give her sympathy too. But sympathy says you're powerless to change your situation. And so I don't want to sort of remind someone of their powerlessness. I want to remind somebody of their power to change their situation. But it's funny when you think you want that sympathy, like I want you to agree with me on how terrible life is, it doesn't help you or fix you or soothe you. And so you can go from person to person and healer to healer and guru to guru, looking for that sympathy or that agreement with how terrible your life is at the moment. Or what I see in the spiritual community is we're all talking about, the alignment of planets. And because there's an eclipse coming up, this is why I'm feeling like I'm feeling, or and so we're blaming the celestial bodies for our mood. And definitely there is influence, like the weather has influence on us, but it's not the reason for how we feel. And so we can play that story for lifetimes until we do the work and go within and find that connection to the greater consciousness, the awareness that is witnessing and enjoying the show.
Absolutely
All of it.
enjoying the show. It's I'm just like, I can just kind of hear him up there just laughing, eating popcorn.
I say
This
that
is good.
Earth is the greatest sitcom in the universe. There's so much going on here that the galactics and the spirits and the guides are witnessing and watching and just laughing, and just think we're hysterical and all that we put ourselves through.
Oh my gosh. And encouraging so much at the same time, because like we were talking about earlier, when we not heal, but when we become to this conscious awareness that we are, love and fear and pain and shame and guilt and joy and all these things all simultaneously, and we pull ourselves out of that suffering, that aspect of elevating my consciousness and my state of being holds space for others to then elevate their consciousness and their state of being, which is like this ripple effect. Like when the
Yeah,
waters rise, all ships rise. And so that
yeah,
doesn't just stay on this earth. This ripple effect is going throughout the whole universe.
yeah.
And I think that we have millions, probably countless beings here watching the show. I think Earth is the greatest
Oh,
show
yeah.
in the universe right now.
I think
Eh,
so too. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And we're starting to see more and more support from extraterrestrial beings whether those are guides or whether those are what we refer to as aliens. You posted something the other day that I thought was just fascinating. I know you posted it publicly, so I know you're willing to talk about it. Would you share with our audience what you experienced and what do you think that means? And like, how do you tie that in?
See, well, I can often spot ships when the part about seeing the light in the sky, that what I post, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. The alien ship. Yeah.
Lying here in my fluffy dressing gown, lying on the couch, watching something streaming on television, streaming off the internet. I stream it on my television and I look, because there's glass, doors here. So I look up and I see these lights, they grab my attention because the stars are always there, but these are grabbing my attention and I'm thinking, oh, what is that? Must be part of the Southern Cross, because in the Southern Hemisphere, there's the Southern Cross, stars in the sky, but it was bigger. And I'm thinking, no, it's bigger. And as I leant my head back, I could see the Southern Cross above and I'm thinking, oh, it's not the Southern Cross. There's some other stars, but they grabbed my attention. I looked away and I turned back to look again. And one of the stars on the corner just started to grow. And I think it disappeared initially. It's funny because you know how this stuff happens in a moment, but it feels like slow motion. And then it started to grow. Like I thought, where is that? I was looking at it and then it goes like this. And it sort of gets about 10 times bigger. And the points of the star seemed to sort of have flat edges. It was really weird. And I remember it was happening in enough time for me to go, is this really happening? Am I really seeing this? Like for me to judge it. And then it came back in again. So it didn't flash, because I've seen the galactics have flashed at me. One time when I was out in the country with my daughter, who hates me talking about aliens, I said, let's look at the stars. And then we got this almighty flash, like the whole sky lit up for a second. And she said, what the F was that? Because it wasn't lightning. There was no storm or anything. And I said, that was just them saying hello, but this was completely different. And then after that experience, I went outside and had a look, and when it went back in, the star itself completely disappeared. It was gone. And I'm thinking, is it behind a cloud? Where is it? The conscious mind is trying to work this out. I found these little movies that were made in the 70s and remakes in the 90s. And I think 2009 was the last remake. And it was all about these kids that had come from another planet that were here on Earth, and they had these telepathic powers, telekinesis and telepathic powers. And they were the funny, crappy little movies. Like the production value was terrible, but the message in the movies were amazing. There was about 4 or 5 movies, and they all had this message. And then the Galactic said to me, we've been giving you this message about who you are through your movies, through your music, and it's all over your internet. When are you going to listen? So in one of the little movies, the little girl has telepathy and the little boy has telekinesis. And then they're talking to other children and they're saying to the other children, we all have these powers, but you humans don't understand. We all are connected to a light that gives us the ability to have these powers, but you humans don't understand that you have these powers, but you can do it too. And I loved that message in these little movies, like you can do it too, because, throughout the cosmos, that's the main way they operate, through telepathy. And I loved seeing telepathy being on television, being showcased on television. The way they do it is their lips don't move and you can hear their thinking. But I loved that. And the little girl also had this connection with the animals. She was talking to the animals as if they were humans, not in a, like not talking down to them like they're animal, just having this telepathic communication with the animals, and the animals were doing things that she was asking them to do. Like there was a wild stallion, and she just spoke to the stallion, and the stallion let her ride it. And yeah, it was a great message in these little movies. So yeah, it was quite an experience, the Galactics chatting to us. But I loved that they said, we've been giving you these messages for years.
Yeah, and through our because now that I'm aware of all of that, looking back through the series of movies, they really, really have. And through music, and now with the internet, we've just like there's no aspect of our life that they can't really reach in and touch us through. And I
Right.
love that we are moving towards telepathy, because
Yeah.
in the new earth things are different. So you, when we first started talking, kind of mentioned briefly moving into the new earth. Will you talk a little bit more about that, as far as what your understanding of the new earth is, and what comes with us into it, and what can't we take into it, and kind of give us a kind of an overview of what you understand the new earth to be?
Well, the new earth is a multidimensional experience, and for each individual, it will be different. So what I've noticed over talking to wanderers and starseeds and spiritual teachers for years is there's many different levels of consciousness on the planet, and some are talking about this divine utopian society. And as I look out into our human society, I don't see that divine utopian society coming on this timeline anytime soon. But when I talked to the guides about that, they said, well, this utopian society that they talk about is actually where they're from, but it's not on Earth in this timeline at the moment. So it's not in our, when I say timeline, it's not, no matter how old you are, whether you're 1 or 100, it's not going to exist while you're physically alive on Earth in this timeline, but it is where they're from. So there are a lot of teachers talking about this heaven on earth, and like we're moving into this heaven on earth. And yes, we will be, but not while we're physically focused or physically alive on this timeline. It is something that is available in a future experience, and maybe, not maybe, where people are connected to their multidimensional selves in that experience. So they're speaking about like we're moving into the new earth, and this is what it's going to look like. And it exists. I'm just repeating myself, but it doesn't exist in this timeline. What does exist in this timeline is an evolutionary process. And yes, and it's the, while we're alive on Earth, it is the expansion of our, of the awareness of our psychic abilities, and the understanding of consciousness and new physics and technology, and how technology dovetails with our consciousness. So that's already happening. It is the awareness of who we are as creators, and how our thoughts do affect this physical world and schoolroom Earth. And so for the next, I don't know, 30 odd, 40, 50 years, how long? Well, it's an evolving process. So for people who think that there's going to be this big shift and bang, we're going to end up in this utopian society, we will, but you can do that when you're dead, right? You've been dead, you know what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, whoo, things feel good now. Yep.
Yeah.
And then what about shifting timelines?
Well, that's happening all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
as
Every
the guides
stinking day.
as the guys have every stinking thought, in fact, every choice that you're making, as the guides have explained it to me, the team, the mob, when we insert ourselves into the Earth experience, we do through all time and space. And with each opportunity, with each life lived through all time and space, there is a multitude of timelines available for us to live out, but they've all already happened. Mm-hmm. So choices that we make choose a specific timeline, and that is happening, like we're shifting all the time. This is what the Mandela effect is all about. And or Sliding Doors, that movie Sliding Doors. Did you see that movie Sliding Doors?
No, but sounds interesting. If it's about timelines, I will watch it.
It is. It's about a woman, what's her name? The actress, can't think of the actress, and she, English woman, American, playing an English. She does quite a good accent, but she misses the train one day, and when she gets home, her boyfriend's, he's a struggling writer, is there, and they continue their relationship. But the day on the next timeline, she gets the train and comes home early and finds him in bed with another woman, and then this experience plays out. So you see these two simultaneous choices made from missing the train, and how it plays out. So it talks about the different timelines and the choices that we're making. So in one timeline, she leaves him and falls in love with somebody else. And in the other one, she suffers along while he's having an affair with this other woman, and she's working hard to support the both of them. And yeah, so these two scenarios play out. And that's what's happening to us all the time, but we're not aware of those other timelines. I've had Penny Kelly on my show many times. Have you ever heard of Penny Kelly?
I have not, no.
So she's a spiritual teacher. She's in her 70s now, but she has talked about being aware of different timelines and even meeting other selves. So she said that she met her other self who made a choice to continue down the career of being a journalist and a writer instead of the one that she made, where she got married young and had a lot of kids, and she became a writer, but she didn't have it as her full-time career because she had a farm and kids and all that. But she met this other self who didn't get married and have the kids and became quite famous as a writer. And there was this funny story where this other self had said to her, you know, you're married at the time, because she's not married now, but at the time when she was experiencing this, do you mind if I pop in your body and have sex with your husband? Because I haven't had sex for a long time.
Now,
so
I want to be able to jump timelines and experience some things like that.
Anyway, and so the other her had sex with her husband that night, and it was quite vigorous sex because the woman had had sex for a while, and the husband was like, oh, sex was really good last night. Can we do that again?
Jumping timelines, saving your marriage, spicing things up.
But, you know, there are all these choices of us out there, the road less traveled, the road traveled. There are all these choices. And I often think about that. I'm not aware of any of mine. You know, during your experience, did you get to see any of that? Maybe
I didn't
not.
get to see any timelines other than just watching the timelines of this life, and like the bifurcation of this decision was made and that bifurcated, and this decision was and that bifurcated. So just I was able to see from early childhood how I ended up in that ditch and how I ended up with the beliefs that made me suicidal. And so I was made aware of timelines, but I wasn't made aware of, you know, other ones outside of this
Different
living,
ones.
this life right now.
I think that when we transition, you know, when we finish this experience, we will be made aware of all that. It could be pretty confusing and mind-boggling to the mind that's trying just to focus and cope with this timeline and the decisions. Like, how much awareness do we want? Because I think that, you know, in the olden days when they called them crazy houses or whatever they called them, were full of people that just had too much awareness. A friend of mine who took her life in her late 30s, she was 36. For a time, she went through this time of depression. Her husband put her in one of these facilities. And when she came out, she said, Karen, the people in there are amazing. They're all so psychic and tapped in, but they can't handle that much awareness. Like they're just, and so they were considered crazy and mad. But she was telling me how amazing all these people were. Yeah, that she saw her in the madhouse. Although it was an expensive madhouse, it was still, I don't know, what do you call those facilities? Whatever they're called.
I don't know. I was in a psychiatric ward for a week, and it was not a good time. We'll just fit, but my consciousness was really small at the time.
They probably had you drugged to the nines, though, right?
No, I wasn't drugged. There was a lot of really, a lot of talk therapy, and you know, my point was, I've been talking this story for my whole 18-year life. That's why I'm suicidal. Telling you about it isn't going to help me at all.
Exactly.
You know, so and some art therapy and things like that, and I ended up checking myself out, but thank God that I was not drugged to the nines. So that is good. You know, when you're talking about psychic abilities, Karen, and I've been aware of that, you know, like some people having a Kundalini experience without having their system prepared for it, their psyche prepared for it, their consciousness prepared for it, can get this overwhelming experience, and it can be really quite disturbing. But not all psychic abilities come in like a flood, and we all have psychic abilities. So what are psychic abilities?
Expansion of awareness. So we're all operating psychically, telepathically all the time, but it's the awareness of it. I remember reading in the Seth books years ago that he said that humanity is communicating telepathically all the time. You couldn't drive on your roads if you were not. And I thought about that. I thought, yeah, right. There is this hidden to the conscious mind, unconscious communication going on with all of us all the time. But psychic ability is the awareness of that and the expansion of that awareness. So when because I teach people how to be psychic and speak to their spirit guides, and often when I noticed this when I was a healer. So I studied as a naturopath and then didn't see anything that was going to change the world. I didn't know I wanted to change the world at that time, but after 5 years full-time study, opened a furniture and homeware shop, had a baby, got married, opened a furniture and homeware shop, closed that down and started massaging to make money. And I started to notice things as I was touching people. I started to have these thoughts, images, past lives, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. Thought I was going crazy. And it's just the expansion of awareness of noticing. So when I sit before a client or a patient, or even when I was massaging way back then, 30 years ago, I would feel sick in my body. And then again, I would think, I'm sick. So I used to be a mobile masseuse. And as I was driving to a client's house, I would get this back pain or knee pain that was almost crippling. I'd have to pull the car over and think, God, I can't do this job. And I'd just soldier on and I'd get there. And the person had the ailment that I felt before I got there. And it was really confusing. And I think when you said what's happening with humanity and how can we help, I think that as we're expanding in our awareness of who we are, including psychic, I think that the teachers out there need to help people navigate this, because there's not a lot of schools or institutions that help us navigate this. Nobody said to the 20-odd-year-old mobile masseuse that I would be feeling people's pain before I got there. You know, and this is something that really would have helped, because I was suffering over the pain, again, identifying it as mine and me, and not understanding that as an empathic, a psychic person who I didn't even know I was at the time, I was feeling the pain of others when I was reaching out to help them, even before I was in their physical presence. So we're all connected all the time. How much we're aware of that connection is our navigation of our own psychic abilities. But as a teacher of this, you don't learn psychic ability, you just expand your awareness of how it's already happening. And just like momentum of thought, the more aware you are of it, the more it expands, and the more aware you are of something, the more it expands. And then you have to kind of get a hold of it and control it. A lot of people feel out of control, as I did. In that moment of feeling someone's pain as I'm driving to massage them, I didn't understand that I could just say, I don't want to feel it, stop it. Like I'm in control of it. I didn't know I was in control of it. I thought that it was happening to me and I out of control. So yeah, I really feel like we need schools and colleges all over the world that really teach people about the awareness of who they are as these multidimensional beings. It's something I'm passionate about, you know, to see this schooling happen all over the world, especially with the kids, that just to help them navigate it. You know, what's happening, who are we, what's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a passion of mine too. And that's the one thing that came out of my experience is like, oh, I don't even know who I am and don't even know what I am. So it's been that beautiful journey of figuring out the what.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm not a miserable bag of flesh, you know, drudging through one little lifetime, you know, that's just, you know, not good enough for love or wealth or anything else like that. And it took getting curious about, well, what is it that I believe and why do I believe that? You know, I think we're all going through, if we choose, an unlearning process. Like you said, we're all psychic. We all are already enlightened. We have just had veils of confusion and beliefs that say to the opposite. And so we're in this mass awakening, which is a mass unlearning, I think. And as we can bring some curiosity and some fun into the process and stop looking at this as a burden and something that's going to be, yes, it's challenging. Absolutely. Every day I go to bed going, wow, what a wild ride. Who am I right now? Right? I'm just changing so fast. Can't even keep up with myself. And that could get way overwhelming, but keeping that curiosity and fun at the center of it and realizing can't do it wrong, you know, and everybody's going through it on their own individual level, and everybody's right exactly where they need to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that the guides have been saying to me as I've been going through this confusion and this year, really. I think that after, you know, COVID, after the last couple of years of being locked in and stopped, There's a lot of movement forward. There's a lot of people taking action. There's a lot of events happening and people going out there and saying, we were all stopped for a while and now we're all going to move forward. And I feel this thrust of energy moving forward around me anyway. And I don't feel like moving forward. I feel the opposite. And so I'm beating up on myself. I should be doing more. I should be moving forward. I should be starting a podcast like you. Like I've had a podcast for 13 years, but doing something else, doing more. And then the more I think like that, the more I feel stopped. And the guide said, just you're exactly where you're meant to be. Just be there. Don't try and force it. Don't try and make it happen. Yeah, just allow. So again, I feel like looking into the collective, it's like we move forward in our great ideas of what we think we want to do. I think anything online is all right, but as people moving forward with businesses, physical businesses and stuff like that, I think it's all going to come crumbling down again. We're in for another wild ride, probably this year, I'd say, where everything's going to shift again, not in the exact same way that we went through before, but in a similar way. So sometimes when we feel halted and stopped, it's for good reason, because everything that you try and get done could be all undone. And just to listen, to be aware of that collective tide and move with the collective tide and do what you can inside that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message to wrap up. I've got one more question though, and I want to know what is God?
That's a big question.
I know. I'm always so curious as to what people say, because there's so many definitions and ways to express it. And I mean, God is only one way of expressing the source behind the term God, right? So
yeah. And I would say to you, what isn't God?
That's the most succinct answer I've ever got. I love it. And it's so true, because there is nothing other than that one
Right.
pure creative source.
Yeah. In this experience of polarity and separation, we come up with these ideas of and labeling of separateness, good or evil, God, devil, and it's really all just one source. There's only one source of energy, and it's a source of pure positive energy. And so everything we experience, all of it, the density, the drama, the bliss, all of it is God. Like all of it is God. There is nothing that is not God. It's all God. It's all this experience that we're given. And as somebody that's had an NDE, you understand that from that perspective, everything that you experienced, all the trauma and drama, was wanted from that perspective, was a wanted experience from the soul's perspective, who understands that they are pure positive energy or pure light, and they can elect to have that experience of forgetting that in order to return to that. And so all of it is good. All of it is God. All of it is pure positive energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Well, Karen, do you have do you have a message or any last words for the audience?
Do we have a message? Do we have a message? Love yourself exactly as you are. Yeah, that's the message. Love yourself exactly as you are.
Love that.
Stop fighting against what you're experiencing in this moment and let it be. Oh, there was a song made about that. So that's what I ask the guides when you ask me that message, because I always go to them. It's like you might say, Karen, do you have a message? And I always say, have you got a message? Because they can answer it a lot better than I can.
I've noticed that. And it's, I go to my higher self and sometimes my guides. And so that's the beautiful thing. We all have such an amazing support team. We are truly not alone.
Absolutely. And that's a message really that so many people have brought through, especially people that talk about angels. The message is we're never alone, because that illusion of loneliness, I think, inflicts many people. And it is an illusion. All of it is an illusion, or density is an illusion that we have created for our own experience of our own desires of wanting to experience that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. Karen, thank you so much for your time, for your heart, for your mission and your message.
Oh,
And where
darling
is the
one.
best place for people to find you?
KarenSwain.com. KarenSwain.com. That side behind that, before I called them, well, actually, after I called them the mob, I used to call my guides the mob. I thought I'd better give them a prettier name, and I called them Blissful Beings, which was actually the name of my massage business when I was in my 20s. And I used to say, "Who are you? Who are you?" And they said to me one day, "Well, who do you think Blissful Beings are?" It's not their name. It's just a name I was given, because they really are nameless. Like, you could call it God, you could call it higher self, you could call it the team, the guy. They said, just pick a name and, like it. You've already got a name.
I like that, the mob.
But
It kind of speaks
call
to
them
their
the mob.
personality or their expression, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But Diane, you're doing a great job. Love that you've started your podcast show. You're really good at this.
Thank you.
As someone who's been doing it for a long time, I love the conversation. And yeah, you've got a lot to share. So remember to keep sharing in all of your conversations, because you've got, like me, you've got a lot to share. Some people think that as a podcast, interviewer, that you just stand back and fire questions at people and never inject your own personal experience. But it is that conversation between two spiritual teachers that expands the collective understanding. And, I'm honoring you for all that you're doing.
I really appreciate it. And I love that you understand and express the value of story, because each human is here to build and create and recreate story over and over and over and over. And that's when we share our burdens and our wounds and our successes and victories, then we all come together as one, realizing that we're more alike than we are different.
Yeah.
All
And
right,
for your audience, remember to check out my conversation with Moon on ATP Media. You can find it on my website, and it's all on a million other platforms. I just started a new platform the other day because YouTube took down one of my videos. Somebody talking about, what's happened in the past couple of years. YouTube said, "No, not allowed to talk about that." So I'm not sort of even though it is the biggest platform, I'm not sort of promoting it as much. I'm sort of trying to find another platform. Interestingly enough, the guy that they took down is starting his own platform, which is really exciting, but it's probably going to be out next year, but I'll tell you about it. It's going to really help us podcasters sort of, consolidate, and it's going to be great.
Excellent. Well, I would love to talk to you more about that. And until then, my friend, thank you so, so very much.